Hello, everyone, and welcome to Tarnished Bronze. My co-host here, Patrick, is ready to tell us all about Hellfire, and that will be, surprise, surprise, the Uncanny X-Men issues 207 to
Eight.
211, and it will encompass that
Oh,
period between Wolverine fighting Phoenix, the X-Men fighting the Hellfire Club and the X-Men fighting Nimrod, and every mutant and their grandma fighting the Marauders. So, Patrick, we are in for a hell of a time. This is not a special event. This is not a special mini series. These are not double-sized genius issues. This is just the July through, I think, October issues of X-Men in 1986. And what a hell of a ride we are in for, including the cover of 200 and 207. So,
yeah. So
yeah, just so cool.
207, we've got Rachel Summers, the new Phoenix. It has she's got a bone to pick with the Black Queen, Selene, the vampiric mutant Black Queen of the Hellfire Club's inner circle. And when I guess when Phoenix was first brought to this timeline, this guy kind of helped her out. And while she was taking a shower, I think in his apartment, if I recall correctly, because I did not prepare on 207, but I remember it well. Um, Celine kills him and uses his life essence. That's how she stays young. So Rachel has not sat well with her,
Yeah.
and she is out to get revenge on Celine. So
And
that's
and they
she.
they have history, right? We remember in Cool and Gath, they were, yeah.
Well, that was with Magma.
Hmm.
So Magma is from Nova Roma, which is a hidden Roman colony in South America, and Selene had plagued them for centuries. So yeah, so that and Rachel's history with Celine is this murder that really didn't sit well with her. It's haunted her. So she snuck into the Hellfire Club with the intention of killing Celine. She dresses, in the French maid outfit, and she's doing a great job until Wolverine gets there. And we'll get to this because I don't want to step on your toes for issue 207, and this actually happens more in 208. But I have some problems with the characterization of Wolverine and some of his sanctimonious moralizing, but we'll get to that.
Let's get into that because that's going to be a not so much a debate, but I'm going to see if I can once I came up with this theorem, it made a bit more sense to me. But
Okay, so
let's not get any ahead of ourselves. This is John Romita Jr. This is what happens. This is the counter argument to the Nepo baby, right? What a scene. Just really powerful, really dynamic. And I think that um, Chris Claremont has started to codify his approach with the captions. Like previously, it's captions and thought bubbles and speech bubbles and all this stuff. Now I think he limits it to the captions are usually the thoughts or the narrative melodrama, and the characters are just allowed to speak. Because I
Mhm.
think after 10 years, we kind of have, or he kind of has the characterizations really down. So, Patrick, I think even though there are so many characters and so many things going on, and every comic might be someone's first comic in this era, I think Chris Claremont definitely has grown out of the more dated side of his style. However, that dated part of it will be what the imitators imitate. They don't imitate the fact that he's got the characters down. They imitate this verbosity, and that's not the lesson that you want to be taking from Chris Claremont. And so the lettering also does a lot of the lifting on this page. Like, just looks so cool, Patrick.
His his secret, I think, is that he can be verbose and keep it interesting and keep it moving.
Yeah,
And so you don't mind. when you turn the page and there's so many words.
Yeah.
But then there are some comics, there are so many words, and it's just a real drudgery. But yeah, I mean, even if you haven't read his stories in a while, especially this run, in my opinion, and when I go back to it, I always think, oh my God, like, is this too wordy just from the looks of it? And then as I read it, I'm like, no, it's actually a pleasure. And I think that's what he's able to do that a lot of people who sort of maybe, let's say, quote, use too many words. I mean, I like to read regular books, so don't get me wrong. I'm fine with a comic with a lot of words, but they need to be purposeful,
Yeah.
not just flowery purple prose.
Yeah. And just some great asides here. Someone is throwing out a bicycle and a traffic light, and there's lots of stuff in there. It's not just all garbled junk. It's not shorthand rubble. There's actual things that you can make out in the rubble. So another, like, this is almost an Image Comics page. The black background, like no panel borders besides the panel being in it. Everyone's clothing torn to shreds. I think there'll be a few characters that have like shredded clothing pretty much in the 90s as being de rigueur. Witchblade comes to mind. Like just a really cool panel. I love the coloring. I'm a sucker for these like purple codes as night sort of things, so the pictures can sort of be bright enough for us to see the details, but that is the sort of shorthand for night. And Rachel Summers's Phoenix, what are those face markings actually? I have my notes in here, like 195 to 275 is kind of like a blind spot. I'm rereading them now, but I would have read them ages ago, and I'm not up to Rachel Summers yet, aside from these issues I do with you. And is
The
that the
face tattoos,
manifestation of Phoenix?
no, the face tattoos are when she was marked as a hound in her
Oh,
time
okay.
period, right? So she's from the
Yeah,
future, from a different, an alternate world, I guess, and she hunted mutants, and these mutant ha hunters were called hounds. So oftentimes she'll be in that BDSM kind of leather
yeah.
outfit with the chained leash that they lead her around, and they tattooed her face for that, so that she was marked as a hound. So those are very shameful marks for her. Um, and
That
also one of
that
the things that
makes
I
the
remember
other thing
incidentally. Oh, sorry.
that shameful stuff makes the other things that are happening in future episodes make much more sense to me now. The sort of dream world that she likes,
Yes,
yeah.
exactly. She's come from a really torturous place where she has watched most of her friends and family be murdered, and she's actually played a role in that. Um, I don't know how a direct role with the people that she actually knows, but because I don't remember some of the details, but for sure she's sort of assisted. Against her will, but she's assisted in bringing those people to very nefarious fates and been one of the sort of survivors. So she has survivor's guilt and also collaborator's guilt. And so I think it's very it's a bit Holocaust coded
Mhm.
with her kind of escaping this mutant Holocaust from her time period.
Yeah, and don't worry, everyone. It will get worse for the merry band of Marvel mutants. We've got Cable and Bishop coming down the pike. Like the future ain't what it used to be, Patrick. It seems like a hell of a hellhole. And the main thrust of this showdown with Wolverine is this Selene really or Rachel Summers really dislikes the Selene character, who is the Black Queen of the Hellfire Club, and she infiltrates and like has to dress up in all their old-timey garb, which is some great fan for service from John Romita Jr. here. And this whole sort of caper works really well. We get corridors, and then we kind of get this, it's kind of like a spy movie. We're infiltrating, we're listening in corridors. We've got some great shadowing. Look at that, like shadowing over the bed there. I just like the fact that I think Chris Claremont might be an old dog at heart, and he makes sure that the Black Queen's costume here in the corner is all like laid out on the mannequin, because he can't resist like having someone draw that. that makes me feel like sort of warm inside. Like it doesn't matter how big and how important you are, and I've written the X-Men for 10 years. I'm gonna have any excuse I can to get the Dark Phoenix outfit in all its glory. Patrick, great costuming here, like the ruffles
Oh yeah.
and just attention
This
to
is something
detail.
you always see with the Hellfire Club is these French made outfits for their servants. And so yeah, this is obviously no exception. And then we've got one of our heroes who's sort of donning this uh tropish outfit that we always see at the Hellfire Club. I think Tessa, right, also kind of
Yeah, yeah.
often wears this corseted kind of French maid-esque look.
I don't know. Maybe at the time this just lives long in the memory of a certain demographic of 10 to 12-year-olds. I'd hate to see where they are now, Patrick, in their various kinks and so on. But now we get this showdown. And so essentially Wolverine does not want Rachel to do the ultimate sanction to Selene, and he sort of basically chases after her and for all intents and purposes kills her or attempts to. Um, Patrick, this is going to set up the next few issues, or at least bring the Hellfire Club into the X-Men's world. Now, you've got some issues with how perhaps this is like a little bit the pot calling the kettle black.
Yeah, I have a lot of problems with this characterization. I understand that maybe Wolverine can be a sanctimonious, moralizing character, so I'm not necessarily questioning his characterization, but the logic behind, say, he lectures about how she needs to follow the rules. He doesn't want her to become a murderer. Like, but this is someone who prides himself and has many, many times in the past on being someone who's a very worthy murderous opponent. You can never imagine someone trying to stop Wolverine from seeking revenge over one of his friends or someone he cared about being murdered. Then he says it's not a fair fight because she snuck into the Hellfire Club with the express purpose of killing Selene. That's exactly what he does in X-Men 133, which is a super famous issue where
Yeah,
he's
in
in
the
the
sewer.
sewage.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's in the sewer underneath, and he says, "Now it's my turn." And he explicitly go infiltrates the Hellfire Club by himself with the intent to kill as many people as he can. So there's that. Then we add it on, I have to add this in too. He saves Celine from dying in an unfair fight, and because he doesn't want Rachel to become a murderer by murdering Rachel. That doesn't, like, I want you so much to not be sullied by the things that I have been burdened by in my life that I'm going to kill my teammate. And at the same time, we've got Celine, who is thousands of years old, and you have to think conservatively, she's probably killed 100,000 people during her lifetime, right? In order to stay young. She's what? We have to think she's killed a person every 3 days for 1,000 years.
yeah, that's a death pile.
Yeah. So the whole thing, honestly, I remember when I was a kid. Every single time I've read it, reread it, when I read it this time, and full disclosure, Wolverine's not my favorite character necessarily. I don't hate him or anything like that, but he's definitely, I'm not a stan. So, that leaves me open to questioning him or, not just automatically taking everything that he says at face value. But Rachel Summers wasn't necessarily one of my favorite characters. I hate this. I still don't like it. I, can you imagine if I would, oh, Matt, I don't want you to turn out like this. And then I shiv you? Like, come on.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a while since I've done a double fold on a juice point, so it's not that bad. Um, so Patrick, I thought I would twist this on its head.
Okay.
Imagine Celine doesn't appear here. I think Wolverine is very, very antagonistic about the Phoenix power. not
Mm.
about Rachel Summers, not about Jean Grey. Wolverine is like traumatized by the Phoenix because the Phoenix is what turned Jean Grey into like the Dark Phoenix, not Jean Grey being the telepath, like the actual Phoenix spirit or power or entity or whatever it is. To me, this makes much more sense as Wolverine versus Phoenix, not Wolverine versus Rachel Summers
And if
Phoenix.
I allow you to first, there's two, so that's double-sided, right? There's two things that support your cause. One is if I allow you to murder and give in to this dark side of yourself, then that's just going to build on itself and you're for sure going to become Dark Phoenix. That's part of it. Also, if I go ahead and kill you now, then I won't have to kill you later because it's likely that you'll still turn into Dark Phoenix anyway, right? So I can give you that point. I still don't really love it, and I actually think that Claremont could have had that in mind, but it doesn't. I don't think though that it really bears itself out in the text. I have
I
to say
think he's
that.
got
I
to
think that's a
bring,
brilliant explanation. I
yeah.
really, really do.
But then when you say, oh, I want you to also stop killing this person. So, the Joker is there and another murderer is going to kill the Joker. Am I all that bothered? Does that make sense? And so if we can't get rid of Selene in this thing. So that's why it doesn't make sense. I was trying to be the devil's
Celine is a
advocate.
villain. I've waxed poetic about her before. I think
Yeah.
she's like one of the best villains ever. So yeah, I definitely am glad that she didn't get killed. They shouldn't have put her in a position where Phoenix was getting ready to kill her anyway. I still don't think Wolverine should have killed his teammate. I mean, if you're that worried about it, kill her while she's asleep back at the mansion.
Uh, what makes much more sense to me too is if Wolverine turns around and does it himself, like because he already has the sins, right? He's not doesn't have a Phoenix power. There's nothing more to corrupt, it's like the old phrase, there's no one left to lie to. Like he's already tarnished. Um and so what's one more little bit of dust on the moral equilibrium of Wolverine, right? So that would have made a lot more sense to me. And then, maybe I need to write my own little bootleg issue 207 and fit all this stuff in, Patrick. Would
I
that have
think
made
even if
would that have been okay with you? Like he stops
that would have been
Rachel and
better, I think that would have been better. Also, I'm not really sure. He slices her, and then we jump ahead to her having fled, and Wolverine is being screamed at by Shadowcat at the beginning of the next
yeah,
issue. I think if we had shown maybe him trying to stop Rachel without necessarily mortally wounding her, and then Celine in their during their debate somehow finding a way to escape, so that Wolverine doesn't have the option of killing her, maybe that would help kind of close that loophole. Because
yeah.
what you said is exactly right. Is Wolverine going to pass up the chance to take off the board someone who, like I said, has a humongous body count.
A
She's
millennia.
literally she's millennia old. I mean, and she has to kill people constantly to stay looking as hot as she does. So, I mean, come on. And all she cares about is looking hot. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think that's a great explanation. I still I don't love it just because I hate the whole rules for thee, not for me. I mean, if it's your mom, okay, yours do that. I kind of it's a pet peeve in real life, so I really don't like it. I think what you said does make sense, and I think it's a really good explanation. It didn't occur to me because I wasn't trying to explain it in my mind. I was more just being mad about it. So kudos to you for coming up with that because I do think it makes a lot of sense, and I'd even go so far as to say that Chris Claremont probably had that in mind, right? It makes perfect sense. She's definitely turning dark. And this is not something that we want unleashed on the world for the second time because they've barely gotten away with it the first time. So
So, Marvel, you
I'm not
already
somebody who wants hand holding, but he probably should have referenced it.
you already have Mr. Chris Claremont on contract. Perhaps it would be nice to dust off the classic X-Men style backup stories, and we can have Chris go
Hmm.
in and do all the bonus material and supplements and stuff that we need to like flesh out these kind of things because I wouldn't be the only person who'd love to delve into this era of X-Men with some real validity behind it, not sort of cosplaying this stuff with other
Yeah.
creators, like go back to the source. Maybe Elsewhere could even be done at the same time, but that might be a bridge too far, Patrick. So to cut a long story short, the Hellfire Club is aware and it is apparent that the X-Men are sort of like trying to sort of mow their lawn, Patrick. And that brings us into 208, which is like another great cover. I kind of like it's sort of silly, like a Street Fighter, the Street Fighter video game where all the characters are all fighting each other. Um, Patrick, this
I
is
love a face off.
yeah, this is just so happens to be the August issue. Like I said, these are just coming at a clip now. And once again, we've got Chris Claremont and John Romita Jr. Now, this opens with Shadowcat admonishing Wolverine for sort of the reasons that we outlined before, and she gets into it a little bit. I just kind of went over that. I actually really dislike the Shadowcat uniform.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay,
I don't hate
done
it,
deal.
but no, 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 no. I don't hate it, but it's not. It's mid, as the kids would say. You
Yeah,
know what? Really, I'm going to point this out later because in another issue, it's more apropos. But notice during this argument where Wolverine has mortally wounded, we think probably she's going to die. One of their teammates, and also a young woman too, by the way. I mean, Rachel is very young. I don't know if she's a teenager still, but she's probably close.
yeah.
Storm doesn't really say much. I mean, shouldn't shouldn't she be stepping in a little bit? She just says, "Enough, both of you. What's done is done."
Yeah.
Like, can you imagine being on a team member A almost kills. We think maybe we're gonna go recover team member B's body, but she's like, what's done is
I
done.
just
Like,
like the
let's just stop
whole
arguing about it.
it's the whole General Douglas MacArthur or Storm and Norman Schwarzkopf thing. It's done. Like I can't even,
And like, I'm not trying to pick this apart because I mean, rereading these even for
yeah,
the what?
yeah,
How many times have I read this story arc? It's excellent. I think Chris Claremont's excellent. It makes you, but being able to sort of have these ideas actually makes it a better comic, right? Because these characters are so fleshed out that you question why they say this or why they say that. It's not like we saw in a previous Tarnished Bronze episode where characters are acting completely out of character and just to no end, right? I mean,
yeah. I think too the moral center of the X-Men is maybe not there. I could have done with more Magneto. Like, I mean, he's an actual. I know it's not real. He's an actual sort of victim of, a horrendous genocidal incident, right? Like, maybe he would have some good perspective on this sort of thing. So I felt that there was a missed trick. To your point before, if we just weren't doing this discussion, we would both just say, "This is astonishing. Buy it at your earliest convenience," and the conversation would end.
no,
But
no need to
I
even pick
think,
it apart. It's excellent. You
yeah,
can't go wrong. Go buy it for sure. But yeah, then that's no fun, right?
yeah. So, and I just love drawings of stuff in sewer tunnels that seem to have tech in them for reasons that escape me. Like I think the last time I visited sewage treatment works would have been in primary school, and it definitely didn't have all this tech. But it seems that just even the storm drain in New York has like amazing technology on the top of it. So I really like that. I
No
love
chairs.
I love, love, love these fleshed out sort of silhouettes that are still drawn in, but just colored monochrome. I think I might have also mentioned it in the invasion thing. Like a great shorthand is instead of coloring all this and it looks too busy, you just use that yellow and it really the art here is absolutely sensational. these two issues, JRJR is just on fire, and he's got some good material to work with, probably too much material. Um, we're getting into another murder by Selene right in this. So they're arguing about the murder. They're gonna go hunt down the Hellfire Club. The Hellfire Club is
Oh,
doing a counterattack.
no, no, no. They're just gonna go find. They're just trying to go find Rachel.
Oh, okay, still
He
finding
knows
great.
that
Yeah.
he's mortally wounded her and she's fled the scene. So the Morlocks and the X-Men are gonna go find her. And
Okay.
yes, immediately, just to show almost. This is why I feel like he should have maybe at least mentioned Dark Phoenix, or maybe
Yeah.
Storm should have said something. I feel like the very next scene we're seeing Celine. Yeah, okay. For I love this twist though, right? So she stops the mugging slash
Oh,
slashing,
yeah.
probably rape scene, by killing the perpetrator. Um, and as the woman's thanking her and so relieved, she turns on her, just showing that Celine has no morals, and the body count from her is just going to continue to go up. So for whatever weird reasons you spared her, you've just cost two people their lives. And
Another
and
great silhouette. Like just great stuff, Patrick. And you can just see the aging. You've gone from, wizened to sort of like the Vampirella character, the big black hair. Yeah, just there's just so much in these little bits that it's probably enough just to do that. But the fact that they come page after page after page is just really striking. And the fact that the story really coheres. Are inhabiting a morally grey world. This isn't like, um, the Justice League is fun, but it's pretty obvious like who the baddies are, right? Whereas this is like, well, I think everyone is somewhat in the wrong and right. Except obviously for Selene. But the rest of the Hellfire Club, not necessarily is bad.
that's true. And yeah, Celine's even evil for the Hellfire Club. But the thing about Celine, though, is, and this is what is so brilliant about the writing, is she's the only one that's maybe less morally ambiguous. And you love her too,
Yeah.
because she's such a great character. She's just so cool. I love how she turns people to dust. I mean, like I said, I'm glad that she was spared from being killed, but just because I love her as a character. But, she probably deserved it.
Yeah. Do you think that she could be in the Brotherhood of actually evil mutants as opposed to the Brotherhood that's just named the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants?
It's tough, I think, to have Celine in any group. They try to wedge her into the Hellfire Club, and she's constantly undermining them and trying to sort of take over the group. So she's not, there are some villains I think that work better in groups, and I don't know, she's more of a solo player to me
Okay.
because she's so ambitious and,
She's just pulling a Dr. Druid left, right, and center.
yeah, exactly.
That's a callback. Yeah, more just great stuff. I could just sit and like read this issue out aloud with you on the channel here, and I'd probably have a hell of a lot of fun, Patrick. You know, the crux of this though is the Hellfire Club isn't too jazzed by just having wanton infiltration or wanton invasion of their space, and then really just gonna draw a hard line under
Well,
that.
yeah, Celine
Like,
convinces them that now's the best time to go ahead and find Rachel and finish her off, right? Because she's broken into their home. She tried to kill Celine. I'm not sure they're too upset about that.
yeah.
The Black King, Sebastian Shaw, and she don't really get along. But she does convince them that now's the best time to go ahead and take Rachel out because she knows that she's still alive. So this is putting everyone on a path to Central Park to find Rachel. And sooner or later, the Morlocks and the X-Men are going to meet up with the Hellfire Club.
Which they do. And so you always like creative use of powers and creative
Mm.
combinations of powers. I think this issue actually did some really cool stuff. Like, is it Colossus who gets sunk? Someone gets sort of
Hmm.
like gravitational. I think, is it Sebastian Shaw that has that sort of, or that
No,
other guy? What?
Harry Leland.
Yeah, Leland. Yeah, so just some really kind of interesting uses of powers and interesting combinations of hero villain. You know, Colossus, well, he can't really do much if he's, 100 meters below ground level. They're kind of neutralizing in a really clever way the heroes, whereas often they sort of do dumb stuff, and it's like, oh, we're just going to leave this person alone because they don't seem like much of a threat. And then they have telekinesis and, exploding powers or whatever. And it's sort of like a little bit silly. But I felt this sort of fight was really cool. And Rogue can't touch anyone if her hands are all like, bound, for want of a better word. How you do that is like a different way. But I thought this fight scene was pretty good. Although I can see um John Romita Jr. is probably just a bit tired.
Yeah, the interesting novel use of powers and the using the novel uses together in
Yeah.
new and interesting ways. It's very common in his Claremont's run in X-Men at this time. And he sort of, sometimes he goes back to the fastball special, but over and over again in these issues when they get into these sort of battle royales, they're definitely always using the powers in some new and interesting way. And yeah, that's one of my favorite things about comics. And I really feel like he's one of the best at doing that, to be honest.
And JRJR too, even in this bottom panel, which is so zoomed out, you know all of the characters because they all have a
Hmm.
distinct footprint on the page. And I think that's an underrated skill. Like just knowing where people are in space and having a visual identity without having to have the color coding of the costume and all that sort of stuff is just like I don't know if you can necessarily teach that. You can teach it in the sense that you need to make sure this happens. Doing it is a whole nother thing, Patrick. And I'm never confused with these John Romita Jr. issues, even though it maybe this fight scene doesn't have the flash that some of those other pages with Wolverine and Rachel Summers did. It definitely gets the job done in a coherent manner. Just really good. Patrick, famous last words. Is Nimrod a bit flat?
I think I can see how one might think that looking back. But at the time, the design of the character was sort of new and fascinating to me. So I still love him. Uh, Not much to him, right? He's so futuristic that he's just sort of, I mean, is it plexus steel? Is he,
Yeah,
yeah,
okay, yeah. So I don't think maybe John Romita Jr. has necessarily nailed down how he wants to do chrome shine. So often artists will experiment on drawing metal and stuff is like, the Sentinels and that. Like maybe you don't have that until you kind of stumble across some way to demonstrate that chrome looking thing, right? So here I think maybe he just hasn't nailed down how he's going to draw sort of semi-reflecting surfaces. But is Nimrod like how old is Nimrod? When did we first see him at the end of Gath, or is that an older character still?
so that's when they accidentally brought Nimrod to their timeline. Um, I think um, I think Rachel is familiar with this kind of
Okay,
advanced sentinel from the future. So yeah, from turning back time to undo the mess that Gath made, right?
okay.
But then the X-Men had a run-in with him where they barely were able to beat him. Again, they were using their powers in new and interesting ways and interesting combinations, and they sort of battle him to a draw. And I feel like maybe he teleports away, and they kind of escape too. So it's sort of a draw. So they
Okay.
have encountered him before, and then he's gone off and sort of almost established his own secret identity. He's living with, if I recall correctly, like a Hispanic family,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and teaching the kid math and
Yeah.
whatnot, and just biding his time until his sensors pick up, this huge group of mutants in Central Park, and he's like, "Oh, this is so efficient. I can go kill them all at one time."
Yeah, I think it just lacks a little bit of tech on the face, and maybe it's the coloring issue. And I think eventually, especially on his run with Thor later on, John Romita Jr. would do more extreme hands and feet on like otherwise sort of like robotic type characters, which then just give it that the weight. That's what I meant. Like this is
I
you made to
always
threaten. It doesn't, I don't like. I don't feel the weight of him as much as maybe what I would future John Romita Jr. villains of this sort of ilk. Does that make sense, Patrick?
I totally see what you're saying. I think I always read it as he's so futuristic that he's there's not much to him on the outside.
Okay,
Do you know what
like
I mean?
Liquid Metal, the Terminator 2000,
Yeah, just that
yeah.
he's and like I said, I always saw him more as almost like he was made of some kind of like plexiglass or
Oh,
something.
Crystal. I can see Crystal now that you mention it. It just isn't mentioned in, like, for Chris Claremont, who sometimes we bag as having a lot of words on the page. It didn't twig that it might be LCD crystal display. Like,
I 100% looked back at this and thought the exact same thing. Like, oh, is this character, is he lame like that, like the Leviathan that Marina,
yeah,
aka Mariana, that she turned into? And I was like, yeah, you know what? I don't know if it's because I remember it so fondly because I love this, again, another villain that I just really loved. He was so menacing in a different kind of a way. He adapted to their powers and their movements so that they really couldn't fight him more than
yeah,
once the same way. That maybe I overlooked things, but then I kind of keyed into the things that I read into him was that, oh, he's so futuristic that he's almost, kind of like Rom was a little
yeah,
bit like that
yeah.
too.
So I must also admit that my upbringing includes Doctor Who. Now,
Mm.
Doctor Who has a lot of great villains, but the visual effect of the villain is kind of dumb. Like the Daleks have basically a toilet plunger and a stirrer as their major weapon. So I'm looking at this as though, like, you don't have a budget for special effects. You can kind of draw whatever you want, but you've sort of come at something that I remember from a Doctor Who episode being kind of like lame because we just had no budget. Does that make sense,
Mhm.
Patrick? So whereas you're seeing it from, oh, I've seen all the cool Star Wars robots and that, this and that, and then this is so menacing because it just looks so void of any like menace.
Mm.
It becomes almost inscrutable, like how nasty this thing could be.
Yeah,
So
yeah, that's actually a good way to put it. Exactly.
I think it does carry across that. I just wish that they tech like the coloring on that tech on the face was sort of different. I can't quite figure out if that's a speaker.
Oh,
You
yeah,
know,
that's a good point. Or the
yeah,
inside of the mouth.
yeah. Um, but we digress. What a cover. So that definitely then looks more like mouth tech when it's colored black and white as opposed to the pink. Just to
And I
looks way
love
more
this.
cool here, which is still a John Romita Jr. drawing.
And here you see how he's shattering like glass.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Great cover.
So I always, yeah, I love this cover. Love Colossus, of course. I love Nimrod. So the combination.
And to be fair, John Romita Jr.'s metal, his chrome vibe is kind of down here. So he almost must be living crystal, which is not to get into that crystal comic warrior thing, which is hilariously bad. Does that make sense to you, Patrick? It makes a bit more
Oh
sense
yeah,
to
for
me
sure.
now. Like,
Now that we've talked about it, I'm like, yeah, this is definitely where I was picking that up.
yeah. And to be fair, I actually really like John Romita Jr. with the flat colors, like this era. I think the modern coloring does him a disservice, and so I was not bagging the color in that last episode before people jump on the comments like, oh, it's not that we don't have metallic coloring. It's the fact that wasn't quite aware of how old this design is. Is it like a Kirby design? Um, just more cool stuff happens, Patrick. Like Nimrod's around, but the Hellfire goons are still doing goon stuff, trying to kill our heroes. Wolverine's just walking with Nightcrawler through the forest like a in the film Bad Boys or something. Does that make sense to you, Patrick? They're all just like going hell for leather at each other, even though this big bad is just showing up. Um,
Oh yeah, this is like just 21 glorious pages of battle scenes, and we've got at least three different groups. You know, we've got X-Men with the Morlocks, I guess really just Callisto at this point. We've got the Hellfire Club, we've got Nimrod, and Hellfire Club's there with their goons. Celine's almost a entity of her own, but
Yeah.
she's thrown into the Hellfire Club. We're gonna have different people grouping up, and we've got characters that have already been taken off the board that we've got to get back, and Rachel's somewhere out there bleeding out. So it's all happening.
I think on the thumbnail for this episode, I have Wolverine versus Phoenix versus the Hellfire Club versus the Marauders. So like it's all happening all at once. Two comments. How cool is this first panel? Like the horizon line, and then you can see above and below the ground, like just so amazing. The other thing is you put your 90s goggles. It's coming. This is 1986, and what do we notice about these
Mm.
fellas with their rifles? They've got some that I think that's almost 4 milli Liefelds on this page. So 1,000 pouches make a Liefeld, the international agreed upon unit of a pouch. And so I think we're at already the Geiger counter is reading 3 or 4 milli Liefelds on this page, which Patrick is just grinning about. I actually think that John Byrne masks of all these weirdo Hellfire Club people is really cool, really menacing. It's hard like I think we've spoken about it before. It's hard to get emotion in a mask, and yet these guys do look nefarious.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
And Patrick, if I was getting
This
paid minimum wage to
the
sign
other
on to
thing
some sort
about,
of organization,
oh,
oh, sorry. If I'll just go.
oh,
If
that's
I
okay.
was
I think there was a lag.
okay, I was just saying, if I was getting paid minimum wage to sign up to some sort of nefarious organization and they gave me these faceless sort of death masks to wear, I think I'd think twice about whether I wanted to sign on the dotted
And
line
all
for
the
their
pouches.
yeah, yeah. Although the color combination is pretty fierce. Like I like they have a good designer for their gear. It's just the face mask might be a bit it might be a bit too kinky for me. I don't know.
I was going to say the other thing about this story is there definitely are stakes, right? We have a couple of deaths, and I think Nightcrawler disappears. We don't even know really what happens to him, and there are other players who are definitely we fear for their lives, and because we have characters that are in the main part of the story that are actually dying. Like I said, we love stakes, so this one definitely has stakes.
It's dire straits. You can tell people are desperate. Like, look at what Rogue is having to do. She's like having to do multiple power sucks or whatever the right phrase for her absorptions is. She's got to do
And
more.
she doesn't like to do that. So
Yeah,
yeah, you don't. Yeah, they always had to. It was awesome to always see Rogue use her powers, but they almost had to make an excuse every time because it's so unpalatable to her. But I always loved it when she had to use it on her own teammates. It's always interesting to see her drawn in a different way with as an amalgam of the character that she's absorbed.
yeah. And the Nimrod is looking more and more fearsome, seeing as all this power stuff just like is fizzling out. Yeah, just some good stuff in here. Now this is where I kind of like lost it a little bit. I think I am missing some backstory in my rereads. Like I said, I just kind of did this on spec. Great sci-fi. Great, like we could do a space opera again with John Romita Jr. and Chris Claremont. Now, this I didn't know enough background, Patrick. So for the sake of me and the Tarnished Bronze audience, we've got Rachel Summers. Is she in a coma or she's having deliriums, one or the other? Is this real?
Yeah, well, so the woman who's seducing her is Spiral.
Okay,
So Spiral is a villain from Longshot's world, I guess.
okay,
So she
so
works for Mojo. So
okay,
she's a sorceress. She's got, what does she have? 4 arms and 2 legs. Eventually, she'll be in the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants that becomes Freedom Force. Um, and she's a very powerful sorceress. Now, I can't remember at this time, to be honest, if we've seen and learned of Spiral, or if the reader is supposed to not know what's going on here. I happen to know because I've read all these, right? But it's been a while, so I can't remember, and I should have looked it up, but I can't remember if Spiral's already been introduced to the team and she's just in disguise. But basically, she takes Rachel at her weakest. She casts all these spells and she sort of seduces her into a world, a future that she could live in where she doesn't have her face tattooed. She hasn't seen all of her family and friends die, and she hasn't been almost killed by her new teammates and left to die. Spiral has her own nefarious purposes for doing this, and but she succeeds in sort of seducing Rachel to the dark side.
So one of these things is like, so, we did our little Rachel is not Phoenix. Phoenix is the different sort of thing. Now, is Rachel having some sort of identity disorder? Is she having a breakdown? Is that why she's vulnerable to these
I,
types
I
of
don't I don't think
desires?
it's a breakdown so much as, like I said, she has so much guilt, right? She has a lot of survivor's guilt. She really played a large role in the hunting and killing of mutants in her time. So she's been a character that since she showed up in these pages has always really had a lot of self-loathing and a lot of trouble fitting in and understanding who she is and where her future goes with all the emotional baggage that she has. So anybody would be able that know is aware of that would be able to play on those sort of the same thing that happened with Jason Wingard and the original Phoenix. But of course, the original Phoenix didn't have anywhere near the kind of baggage that Rachel Summers has.
And I kind of like how the first glimpse that we get to these alternate future people is kind of like a very mixed bag personality. I think Cable is just far more one-dimensional. No matter how kind of cool it is that he's the son of Madeline Pryor or whatever. I mean, that might not even be canonical anymore of like Scott Summers and Rachel Pryor. Whereas here, and he's very focused and very one-dimensional and so on and so forth. And in many ways, that's cool because like the visual and the way that you use him as a foil for these younger characters is what makes Cable cool. Here we have someone who has more power than what you and I could ever dream of, can take on probably the entire X-Men or at least go one-on-one with them and come out maybe ahead, unless the Wolverine gets the jump on her. Someone who's so powerful has a backstory very, very similar maybe to these things that Magneto grapples with. Like
Hmm.
if you want to hunt monsters, first become one.
Yeah.
It just Chris Claremont could have he left a lot for us to interpret. And that's what I enjoy about these stories, Patrick. And sure, sometimes we don't dot all of the dots properly because, well, why would we leave Celine on the table? But I think the fact that we can have this conversation and it sort of
Hmm.
it touches on some of these like bigger concerns and concerns that fiction in general has had because like not everyone can have these experiences, but we can all maybe illuminate ourselves from them. And I know that this is dumb talking about this in the sense of August 1986's issue of X-Men, but I don't think it's trivial. And I think it is great that that Chris Claremont gives us the space to read these in. And that he has an artist in John Romita Jr. who could just as easily draw teen romance things like this, as well as epic fight scenes. Just that not everyone could do both, Patrick,
Hmm.
is what I'm
Oh yeah,
saying.
absolutely. And you're exactly right. This is these scenes with Spiral in disguise seducing Rachel with the future that might have been and may still be is a complete departure from the battle royale that we're having in Central Park, right? Which is also a complete departure from them sitting around the mansion and having intimate heart-to-heart conversations, right? But
Or
all three
running
come
around
across
sewers, just garroting people left, right, and center.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and and Storm just saying, "You two sort it out." Like, yeah.
I can't be
But
bothered.
but back to the fights. It looks like Nightcrawler was alive, but not for much longer. Just look at that. Look at that left cross, Patrick. Just yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, Nimrod, even especially at the time, but still, he's just menacing in a different kind of a way. He's completely, he comes off as completely non-human in his interactions with the X-Men. Now, in his secret identity as, the home tutor of his friend Jamie, whatever his Rodriguez or whatever his name is, um, he actually has a personality and is kind of very human-like. But when he fights the X-Men, he is a cold, calculated killer, and they have a very hard time dealing with him every time the stakes are raised. But yeah, well, here we have Nightcrawler sort of getting punched in mid teleport, and he
Yeah.
disappears.
Yeah,
And
just
I don't,
brutal.
yeah.
And I love the look of shock on Storm's face. Like, just, once again, you sell the reaction and it just hits all that much more harder. And I didn't mention, I do like the sort of Terminator 2. Every now and then there's a panel from Nimrod's eyes, and it's kind of like a purple visor, and it has like a little readout, like those Terminator
Hmm.
movies. I think that is selling the sort of like calculating nature of this guy that maybe the thought bubbles kind of don't. So I kind of I liked that a lot. And here we get the payoff though. So we're 3 issues into this Hellfire saga. Part one has just been infiltrating the Hellfire Club by Rachel, Wolverine just like going through cityscapes and just, berating Rachel. Issue 2 has been like going through the sewers trying to find Rachel and the X-Men. The Hellfire Club, just members of them murdering people in Central Park, left, right, and center. This has come to the crescendo, but we've also gone on a side quest into the sci-fi world. So much stuff has happened, Patrick, and we're not even anywhere close to the end. But we do have Shadowcat in her terrible Karate Kid looking outfit, trying to do some sort of maneuver to old.
I love how she's come back up
Yeah,
from the
because she
underground
disappeared into the
inside
ground. Yeah,
Colossus's body so that she can surprise Nimrod. That's just great. And so that she can disrupt his electronics because otherwise if he saw her coming, presumably maybe he would have been able to prepare for that attack. And then Colossus puts the whammy on him,
yeah. Um,
literally.
just is Colossus kind of like, there's all of those lists that are currently online. Is Colossus just, I'm blanking on the phrase that people use, but is he just low key one of the best X-Men, Patrick?
Oh, I mean, for me, I've always really liked him. I think he's really very popular. Do you mean power-wise?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I don't think that he's ever been raised to, now they call him Omega mutants or whatever,
yeah.
something like that. I don't think he's ever been raised to that level. Um, so yeah, in fact, I feel like almost, especially at this time. Now, I don't know how he's treated in present day comics because, as we've discussed, X-Men is a little impenetrable to me at this point. But I feel at this time he was a little bit sometimes underplayed. So it was kind of cool to see him get his due here. Finally, he's been underground for many, many pages.
Yeah,
He's
I
been
forgot about
taken
that.
off the battlefield.
Yeah.
Uh, so for him to kind of get the coup de grace a little bit here, or what was maybe hopefully the coup de grace, but ended up not being. It was cool because I think a lot of times I feel like he was a little bit underused and mistreated in Secret Wars 2 around this time. Not Secret Wars 2, but Secret Wars as well.
Okay, so what's your grief with that, Patrick?
I just feel like, he's just such a cool character and he's so powerful and invulnerable. I feel like a lot of times he's sort of not given his due as a hero.
All
They'll
right.
just kind
Well, he did get his shine here, Patrick. Like this is a really cool, he just picks him up. Yeah, like kind of just a great visual.
yeah.
And he's finishing the job. Like, yeah, there we go. That's the money shot. And it does seem that this LCD display is kind of broken for Nimrod here, so we won't be able to get another high score on Frogger. In a,
This is really good where he's just basically swatting him back and forth against the ground. I kind of love
yeah,
that.
in a with a facial that just looks you know, orgiastic is a word for it with Colossus. He's just having the time of his life, just flinging this Nimrod to and fro. Yeah, just kind of really good stuff. And once again, I might have sold the design short before, but I feel like this has some kind of feels like a bit more weight, a bit more heft to Nimrod with someone else interacting with him. Nimrod just in isolation does look a little bit flimsy. Is that a word? Whereas in
Mhm.
interacting with others, it gets this sort of perspective.
And when you're knocking all of his covers off there, kind of
Yeah,
helps.
yeah, yeah, yeah. The safety guards. And
But
this
yeah, here
just
we see the final seductive Rachel.
okay, yeah, because I didn't quite capture that on first read. I didn't know what was going on, to be honest. Obviously I didn't quite have the backstory that you maybe needed with the siren character. Um, I actually thought it was like a fever dream of someone who's tangling up Nimrod with all of the colored electrical cords. So it just didn't quite make sense to me. Now it's like one of those films where they do the intercut thing, so you have all the rainbow stuff, and then when you zoom out, the rainbow stuff is the bindings on Nimrod. So I
Yeah.
get what they were going for here, but it just didn't come across like I just wasn't as au fait with all of this background stuff as maybe what I should have been, seeing as some of this I've at least read once. Now they can't quite put the kibosh on Nimrod for reasons that escape me. I mean, they're kind of mentioned here, but he does have some sort of auto refresh kind of thing, and you can only do a certain thing to him once. And then Wolverine is about to put the coup de grace on him, but he that's not gonna stick.
Teleports away again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
But I don't know what happened to Nimrod after this. I collected X-Men a little while after this. I don't think he came back in this series. Let's say for the next X number of issues. I don't to coin a phrase. I don't can't remember off the top of my head how many more X-Men I had, but through Australia, the Outback and the what was the one where Madeline Pryor was that Inferno? Yeah, through Inferno. I don't
yeah.
think they, such a great character, and I don't really know, can't remember what happens to him.
Yeah,
He kind of disappears. He probably, goes off and licks wounds.
it, like I said, I have the
I don't
blind
know.
spot up until about 300, and I'm fairly certain that there's something about Nimrod that helps them make like the Super Sentinels, and that's about like Bastion, someone. His name might just be Bastion. And they're making like these better Sentinels. And then I think in the Krakoa era, there's like an alternative timeline where they use like all this Nimrod tech. Just the cool thing about the villains is like it's cool when they come out of nowhere. It's not cool if it's like every week we have to deal with this idiot, you know.
That's fair. Yeah.
So so
They could have
that's
just had him pop up at all different times. They're fighting the Marauders and he busts out from below the tunnel. Like every battle that the X-Men have with whatever villain, Nimrod busts up from the ground.
yeah, that's another bootleg series that you can do, Patrick, where you can just like photostat Nimrod into every single issue in your collection so that you can have like the your
Nimrod
Nimrod.
and Celine, they're both, she's riding him around,
Yeah.
like on his shoulders. I don't know.
So
Because I feel like Celine she kind of fades into the background. I mean, there's a big change, right, coming in the X-Men, and really these next two issues for us were we kind of sort of see it, and I do at least see it as the beginning of the end or the end of the beginning or whatever you want to say. And as we transition to this new era of X-Men and the new configuration of the team that sort of ends up coming about. Some of these characters at least and like I said, maybe I didn't collect for too much longer after this, but I mean, I feel like I did because I remember them going to the Outback and Havoc joining and,
Yeah,
a
yeah,
lot of
yeah.
different changes.
Yeah. There's
But I never
still.
heard of Celine again. And, Rachel, we've talked about this before. I know she ends up in Excalibur, but Rachel's kind of not seen in the pages of Uncanny again, at least for a long time, if she does come back.
And I have the first 25 issues of Excalibur, and so I'm aware of Rachel Summers, and so that's why I was very perplexed almost by that little sort of drift into this siren world.
I
Um,
actually can't remember how that resolves or in what issues. Is there, if there's like maybe an annual that I'm not thinking of, or because Longshot joins the team, but I don't remember Rachel coming back from Spiral seducing her, but she must escape at some point. I don't remember how any of that's resolved, but I don't think it happens in Uncanny X-Men. Maybe I'm wrong. Again, I mean, I don't think anybody comments, but let me know. I haven't read the comments in months, but
yeah,
if
yeah,
anybody
no,
knows, I mean, I should probably wiki that as
it's a little bit irritating. I know that Claremont keeps a pretty tight rein over the X-Men at least for another maybe 2 years. The problem is that remember his first 3 or 4 years they're only doing like 6 episode or 6 issues of the X-Men at a time. So when it says like, oh, Chris Claremont, 17 years of Uncanny X-Men, well, at least 18 issues are like not 18 months worth of issues. So that's another little mini sadness. And another little reason why we need one of these, an updated classic
yeah.
X-Men backup series. Yeah, just get more into this stuff. And I don't like, let's put it this way, I do not want other people doing their cosplay 1980s X-Men. I would like to, if at all possible, have Chris Claremont do it. Maybe we can't get the same artist, although JRJR is at Marvel. So does that make sense to you, Patrick? Like
Oh,
I don't want to
movies.
I don't want to live in the past. I want to have some of this stuff that we've raised clarified. Like, for one, why isn't Magneto used more? He's the head of this Xavier's school right now. Why isn't he a sounding board for how Wolverine and how Rachel Summers are feeling about like she lives in a genocidal world, like she came from that, you know? Does that make sense to you, Patrick? Like maybe
Yeah.
this is
Well, he had
we
kind
need the
of
director's
faded.
cut.
He was more involved with the X-Men, and by this time he had sort of faded into the background to be more of a teacher of the New Mutants, and they were really focusing him on being the new head of the school, and he was really moving away from the X-Men side of things. But
Okay.
for a while, he was more involved in the X-Men and actually sort of maybe going on missions with them, as I recall.
Yeah, because he's got a luxurious grey mullet now, so we need to get him outside of the school and into the wild where he can have it luxuriate in the wind. Yeah,
I love this cover, but it's like make our day, but then they have Nightcrawler on here just like clinging to life.
yeah, like everyone looks fearsome except for Nightcrawler is on death's door, but that's
He's
fine.
been dragged through it, and yeah, I mean that maybe they should have left him off. No offense, because actually didn't really like what I, especially at the time, was just beside myself that they were, basically killing Nightcrawler off as far as Uncanny X-Men goes.
He's in
This is the
Excalibur.
Yeah, but I never collected that at the time, and
Okay.
so yeah, I mean, this problem with Nimrod that he's had, this is just the beginning. He does, as you can see here, he does show back up, and pretty quickly is taken off the board even more violently this time. So, but we'll
So,
get to that.
Patrick, when you just thought we could have a bit of a breather, the drama just like amps up. So I think we're in Los Angeles right now, and there's a couple of the New Mutants or a couple of the
She's a Morlock, and
Morlocks. Yeah,
he's a renegade Hellfire Club goon, and they've fallen in love. And to try to get away from the world, the West Side Story world
yeah.
that has no future for them, they've run away to L.A. But we don't know who. We later find out it's the Marauders. They're being tracked by a group of assassin mutant killers. They kill Richard here, Tommy's boyfriend, and Tommy is able to escape. This is an excellent B plot, by the way. It's
Yeah.
only at the beginning and the end of the story, but it's so affecting, and it was even on the 100th read or however many this was. And we'll get to it. I'm sure hopefully, there's some scans from the end, but the way it ends is just real. To use the word again, it's just very affecting. Even however many times I've read it, it definitely feels like the rug's pulled out from under you. It's written and illustrated so well. But you really root for Tommy. She thinks she's gotten away. She hops a freight train to go back to New York, and try to escape these killers. And we'll find out at the end of the issue what happens to her.
I think foreshadowing is the key to good literature, Patrick. So that
Yeah.
was good that you spotted that. And that is a hell of a look that Tommy rocks, by the way. So
Yes.
if I was some sort of drab gray Hellfire guard who I just signed on and thought, oh, maybe the mask is a bit kinky, but like I quite like the outfits. If Tommy comes across my worldview at some point with the flamboyant like rainbow wave haircut
And the
and get
hair.
up. Yeah, that's enough to make me rescind my totalitarian outlook and join the bandwagon, Patrick. I don't know about you, but
Anybody with rainbow hair, I'm down for it. Yeah.
okay, like yeah, we're rescinding our membership in the pouch club and making a better choice in our lives. Speaking of choices, like so many cool little things in this story. This is a breather. We've just, like I said,
Mm.
I'm gonna recap it because that is our little capture or thumbnail for the episode. Wolverine versus Phoenix, the X-Men versus the Hellfire Club, the Hellfire Club and the X-Men versus the Nimrod villain. I just need a little bit of a break. Rogue needs a little bit of a break. She wants to go shopping, but she has to divert this catastrophe mid mid commute to the shopping center.
Well, she's searching for Phoenix. They still haven't been able to find Phoenix.
Oh
So to be
yeah,
fair,
that yeah.
she is searching for Phoenix. Yeah, people wonder why I'm afraid of heights. It's because I read comic books, and at any moment, if you're cleaning windows on a skyscraper, it could just fall. These things that, I mean, knock on wood, don't seem to happen in real life. She saves these guys, and she decides just like the reader, she also needs a break. So she ducks into Bloomingdale's. As you can see, she's flying around in tatters and rags and gets herself a new outfit that looks conveniently like her old outfit. She definitely loves green and black, and it looks good on her, so I have no problem with that. And she gets a facial, but then eventually people realize that she was the person who saved the guys from the window washing accident. And even though she saved two people and she's just sitting here trying to get a facial, of course, the anti-mutant sentiment is thick these days. So a mob is starting to form until one of the guys, I don't know what he's doing in Bloomingdale's, maybe he's trying to find her to thank her, stands up for her and she kind of slips out the back.
So
Now, what
Patrick,
if Rogue had decided instead to go with the red and black ensemble as her
no,
superhero costume going forward?
I love this little mini rogue solo adventure. The only thing that was negative for me was the makeup, which I'm not going to show on, the channel because it's just I don't want children to be scared. The makeup was a bit much for me in the reveal in the panel after this. And I just like to sort of put this forward to you that in 12 months' time, Rogue will be completely recapitulated almost exclusively for the male gaze. Like the No, I'm not talking about Savage Land Rogue. I'm just talking about the whole like cut off jacket and the big hair and the the whole um she just seems like far more normal, and I don't mean that in a pejorative sense, just far more normal in these sort of issues. Does that and more interesting actually.
Yeah, more interesting. There was the southern aspect of her, there was the runaway aspect. But you know what I got, and I mean this in a positive way, 100%. But I always kind of got a lesbian vibe from Rogue around this time. And so maybe she was dumbed down to the common denominator, right? Because I know then she gets with Gambit and and I know she always wanted to get kissed and all that
That's what I
mess.
meant by the male gaze. Like all of a sudden, by the time Mark Silvestri, who can draw the a female with the best of them, he sort of revives her look. But Chris Claremont is still doing the writing, so it's not like she doesn't just become a sex pot overnight. I don't want people to think that that's what I'm getting upset about. It's more just the fact that like Rogue is a far more interesting person 3 or 4 years into her tenure in the X-Men than she is like going down the line, Patrick. And I'm not sure if they turn her from this sort of like skunk haircut, kind of like really 80s style into the sort of the bombshell era, but still Chris Claremont doing the writing. So she always has that strong character. And then later on, people just saw the 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 pin up and projected all this other stuff onto the pin up, and then Rogue becomes far less interesting.
Well, it doesn't really go with her character, right? Like she's
Yeah,
not a
just
bombshell kind of a person. She's basically never been kissed except when she knocked out her childhood sweetheart, right? And thought she
yeah,
killed
that's
him.
what I mean. It just seems a very strange.
She comes from, again, she has this survivor guilt, sort of similar to Rachel, where she knows that she's really messed up Carol Danvers' life, uh, when she was a villain. So she has a really interesting backstory. And then during these years, she's sort of still feeling like she's being accepted. She has been accepted by the X-Men, but there's definitely this undercurrent of her being a little bit of a lone wolf within the team, because of her background. I feel like all of those things inform her character more, um, than
it's a redemption arc. She's
yeah.
re
You lose a little bit of that if you sort of needlessly introduce sexing up the character a little bit. So I actually, to full disclosure though, I don't know that I have those issues that you're talking about. So I don't know if I even really have a good background to talk about that
Okay,
though.
so I'm talking about the mischaracterization is maybe from the mid to late 90s onwards, but
Mm.
the look is going to happen in the next 12 issues, as far as I can tell. Just I'm not sure if they updated everyone to just not look quite as dated.
Mm.
That was more I was curious, but if you haven't gone that far, then that's okay. You also mentioned that Dazzler is in this episode. Now, I didn't catch that at all, Patrick.
Now, this is all foreshadowing.
Okay,
It gives it away, but because I've read it, you really don't know necessarily what happens. But she is on tour. I love the part of her. I remember really resonating with me when I was young of, she's sort of lowered herself to be a backup singer for Lila Cheney when instead of
oh
being a star.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, the roadies and the band are going out after the show, and she just wants to hang out by herself. And she has this confrontation with a mirror image of herself. Now we know because we've read the future stories that that's Malice, who is sort of another member of the Marauders,
Okay.
and kind of takes over her victims' brains. And the telltale giveaway sign is that when she wakes up and walks away, she has the choker on. that she didn't have, and she says, "Oh, what a nice choker! It's just my style." And that on a reread, you realize, "Oh no, get the choker off!" So yeah, that'll come back to haunt her eventually and set her up against the X-Men and sort of get her back on the team eventually. So,
Okay, so
or
that's
not back on the
okay, because
on
there's so
team.
many Malices. There's an older Malice. There's a Malice from the Fantastic Four. I think Sue Richards becomes Malice. Like that. That's what I
That's the
want.
same Malice.
Okay.
That's the same Malice. So Malice from the Marauders, she also was so her first confrontation, I think, with the X-Men was she was in the Savage Land and she fought, I want to say she fought the X-Men there. Or maybe that's Vertigo. I could be getting them mixed up. Anyway, regardless, the Malice that takes over Allison Blair slash Dazzler is the same Malice that eventually takes over Sue Storm and wreaks havoc with the X-Men or with the Fantastic Four.
Okay. Well, that's good to know because
Same
I was
character.
like, it's hard to keep these Malices straight if they're all a different person. Okay, no, so that was just a clarification. I was like, is that the Malice or is it yeah, okay, that makes
Yeah.
much more sense because it
She
just,
sort
I'm
of takes
reading.
over people's mind and makes them the most selfish, sort of self-absorbed, evil version of themselves. So that's what she does to Sue Storm and Dazzler.
Okay,
So
so,
here we have lots of words, but they're offering the X-Men and Magneto the position of White King within the Hellfire Club's Cardinal Court or whatever it's called. And he says that they'll consider it. This is also an interesting vignette because this he sees that X Factor in a crowd of people and realizes immediately that they're his old foes, the original X-Men, and he thinks, "Wow, they've really betrayed Xavier's dream. They're hunting mutants now." So he
so,
actually falls for the X Factor line that they're mutant hunters, but he does recognize them immediately.
so Patrick, this is we're going to do a little diversion here. I love the X Factor series by Peter David and friends, where they're like this detective sort of thing. He did it in the early 90s, and then there's, I think, maybe 100 more issues in various series throughout the 2000s of this kind of conceit. And it has Madrox, the Multiple Man, and a whole bunch of those, like Guido, all the cool characters from latter day X Factor. Now, have you read X Factor at all?
The beginning, let's say the first
So
15 to 20.
I had no clue that there was an X Factor, which was kind of like the Deep X-Files conspiracy version of X-Men, like where they're kind of like both sort of double agents, like they're trying to, under the auspices of hunting down mutants, are sort of defending mutants. I kind of
Yes.
thought that had a lot of conspiracy theorists, like X-Files type stuff to it.
Yeah.
Um, I presume that is maybe the first 20 odd issues of this thing. How long does that
That's
last?
how it started. Yeah, the X Factor started by the four of them coming together and then eventually Jean Grey. And you're exactly right. They pose as human mutant hunters so that they can identify the mutants and get in touch with them first because the anti-mutant sentiment at this time was super rampant. All of the Marvel comics were playing into it. So a lot of the stories were based around that. And because they have first dibs on hunting these mutants, and people are now calling their hotline to
Yeah.
tell them, presumably they can't use Cerebro, I guess, anymore. So they just use their hotline. They go as if they're going to hunt these mutants, and then they take them in and they teach them how to use their powers, or they set them up in jobs or whatever.
So maybe you need to see if there's any good issues of X Factor that we can take a look at here, because that might be some buried precious metals for the channel, Patrick, if there's one or two good arcs in that. Because like I said, I've only read, I know I'm talking about issues 83 through to 95 or something, which is like this Peter David stuff, and then Peter David does a volume two and volume three of X Factor, and they're very, very good, but just not that. Does that make sense?
Not that. Yeah.
Yeah.
All that's all I know about X Factor. I have no idea what happens to it eventually.
Okay. No, well, that sounds like something that we could delve into, just at least even just to see how the first arc pans out because it seems like an interesting conceit from reading what it's about in these X-Men issues. I'm not sure if it carries off once we get into the issues. It seems like such a cool concept referred to
Hmm.
in these X-Men issues. Um, and I just had to point out that like there's a lot of text on this, but the page isn't sort of boring, and there's a lot of cool. I don't know who's the haberdasher of Sebastian Shaw, um, but he does have some very out there fabrics that he's purchasing for his outfits. And are they shoulder pads or is he just really built?
I think it's 80s, so they have to be shoulder pads. He also loves that big white bow in his hair too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It kind of reminds me of the 17th century. No one's going to take you seriously unless you wear a powdered wig. So, that's something. And now we get to, like I said, there's all these little vignettes in this. We've done at least three or four little mini stories, and now we're getting into just I always like cliches become cliches for a reason. Shadowcat or Kitty Pryde and Colossus together again for the 58,000th time. They're such a good pair. Um, one of the things is here is like they de sort of racinate, they de escalate this situation like not using powers, which is kind of fun. Does that make
Yeah,
sense
and I
to you,
don't know
Patrick?
why Nightcrawler ended up, they're looking for him too because he's disappeared during the battle with Nimrod. And this is where he's ended up somehow. I don't know, some warehouse. But yeah, they find him. They go and Kitty gives an impassioned speech that sort of and they are able to escape without using their powers or revealing their identities. And it was a lot of good dialogue from her actually here.
Yeah. And one thing I'm curious about, Patrick, is your opinion on this. Is Magic a good character just waiting to happen? I mean, she always just seems to be defined by who she's adjacent to. Um, and that was especially true, I felt, in the Cool and Gath, like
Mm.
so, I
Yeah,
don't,
I feel like she could have been. And I've said this to you before that I always thought that the setup of the New Mutants was great. The international cast, the powers, the different looks for all of them. But for me, it never really played out, and I think it's probably, like I said, because I was sort of biased against the art, probably. So I don't really know how if it panned out that well. I liked her better before they introduced so much to the magic side of her. I like her just as a mute, maybe not overboard, but from my point of view, they really went so far to just the limbo and the demon queen and all this stuff with the soul sword and the
yeah,
and the armor. I wasn't as interested in that, and to me, that kind of detracted from her. But I know probably a lot of people love that too. I mean, depends on your penchant for underboob, probably, and mine's pretty low. So I liked her when she was just more of a regular character like everybody else.
yeah. I'm just curious about is it a fan favorite of having Madeline Pryor team up with Magic and whoever else you can find in the scraping the bottom of the barrel, or is it just a Matt favorite of having this be a mini series for you to look at? Maybe we'll do the Rogue Savage Land as well, all together, all at once, and just like sell 18 copies to probably three different people with the variant covers and so on and so forth, Patrick. So you're probably right. It's the I do like little
She's super
people.
handy as a character.
Yeah,
She's
but
super
just
handy as a character
yeah.
because she can teleport large numbers of people easily without all of the rigmarole that Nightcrawler has to deal with. And as a plot device, I think that's great. I have no problem with that. I mean, people use plot device pejoratively, but I think in comic books, there are certain things that you need. You need people who can fly. You need people who can teleportation is always very handy because you don't want your characters to be stuck in one place. It just gives them a little bit more options, I
Okay, I
think.
want them to have to use public transport more. I just want the X-Men
Ride
on
the
a
bus.
bus. I think I want Batman to take a cab to where he needs to go, like, but he can have the cape fly out the window.
The Bat Cab.
Yeah, just yeah, that's
Oh, Robin on an electric scooter.
yeah, just
Oh, by the way, I was in a foreign country recently, and I never done this before. I've ridden electric scooters many times, but my friend was ahead of me, and somebody almost walked into the lane,
yeah.
and I was watching him so much that I stepped off the scooter.
Uh,
I ran beside the scooter and got back on. And if you know how my penchant for injuries, when I when I finally got off the scooter for real, I was like amazed that I did not injure myself somehow. Yeah, I was so embarrassed. I'm like, I had my hands on the brakes, like I know how to ride one of those things, but I literally jumped off and ran beside of it for a couple of steps before I was able to get back on. It was superhero-like, I would say.
I'm
If
um
superheroes were stupid people who didn't know how to ride electric scooters.
I'm very worried that you now have Steve Rogers, Captain Avengers issue 299 ankles.
I'm serious. Like at the end, I told my friend, "Oh my God, I can't. I'm just like checking my legs to make sure that I'm not hurt." He said, "Yo, you're such a hypochondriac." I said, "Did you just see what I did?"
Yeah, that's a bit of a worry actually that you
Yeah,
can't control
I've
your
made
body.
it.
Like, yeah, control. Let's all focus the rest of the year on learning how to control our bodies.
I know. It's so embarrassing. I've never done anything like that before. Rogue, or excuse me, Storm and Wolverine have this great heart to heart. Again, it's another one of these vignettes that you're talking about. It's really great. She's basically telling him to be a team player and that he needs to follow the rules. She doesn't really super reference the fact that he tried to kill one of his team members, but I mean, I guess the devil's in the details. I mean, at least she spoke to him somewhat.
Patrick, I have to come out of the ether on this. I'm a big Wolverine Storm shipper. I haven't
Okay.
gone to the state where I write fan fiction and upload it to various outlets, but like I really enjoy this relationship. I do not think it would be spoiled by them being in an actual relationship. I find all of their other interactions all of their other romantic interactions just asinine in the extreme, except for the case of Doctor Doom has a soft spot for Storm. I
Hmm.
kind of like that. Um, all of the other romantical interactions, I know that Wolverine is in a throuple now with Jean Grey. I find that just absurd. I think they've gone through too much like traumatic stuff with Dark Phoenix for that to ever be a thing. I find Storm and Black Panther to just sort of be a little bit pandering. It just seems like
Love that.
it seems just very obvious, and what T'Challa is like the king of a sort of empire and kingdom, and Rogue is someone who was in and outside of her entire life. It just is a very strange
Oh, Storm.
Storm, sorry, yeah,
Yeah.
Storm is an outsider. It just seems very strange to me. So I really love this. I know that maybe there's a few episodes or a few issues here and there that they are a thing. Maybe we just need to do an X-rated version of this page, Patrick, where they can not only discuss all of the things that we were worried about in that first issue about the motivations and he needs to be chided more, and then you could make that as erotic adjacent as you wanted, like how are you going to discipline Wolverine for his
I can
transgression?
I can see where you see that. I mean, the way I relate to them on this little interaction conversation heart to heart is, they're the vets, and they've been through the wars together. So I could see in a moment of weakness, if they were, somewhere, say they were, trapped, and they thought it was their last night on Earth, kind of a thing.
In the
Maybe
outback.
yeah, maybe that route. But yeah, honestly, their connection really comes through great in this conversation, and yeah, I thought it was wonderful. Two characters that aren't necessarily my favorite. I mean, I love a powered storm, a depowered storm. I wasn't necessarily my favorite character, but I really love this interaction with them.
Yeah, no, that just seems like the fit is good and it doesn't. like it's more than the sum of its parts when they're the two sort of leaders or the two experienced people on the team, and with Magneto in the sort of background. It would also be an interesting dynamic to have these two together when the other OG X-Men are also in the X-Men, because then you've got like the sort of tribe within the tribe that, oh, maybe like these two people are right because they've done different stuff than the original X-Men, which is like that super influenced by Charles Xavier and so on. Whereas these
Hmm.
Storm and Wolverine are sort of more, that were their own people before they ever became X-Men. And so
Yep.
that would be an interesting dynamic in the team, including like a Cyclops. Does that make sense to you, Patrick?
Oh
That
yeah,
kind
yeah,
of like
for sure.
it works both in isolation here and in the context of the larger X-Men. Sorry, I just wanted to clear that up, and you won't find my name on all of these fan fiction stories, so don't worry. Um,
And then
devastating,
this is
devastating.
devastating end to the beat. And who the hell is Tommy? What do we care for? It's just because it's such good writing. It's the script and the drawings. The Marauders super raise the stakes. They're so dangerous. We haven't even laid eyes on them, and we're just fascinated by them. And, just as soon as Tommy thinks that she's made it back to the Morlock tunnels and back to safety, they show up immediately, and they're already on her ass, and she's dead.
Yeah, this
It is
widow's peak gun tooting.
it's a throwaway character that we see for maybe 4, 5
Yeah.
pages max. And it's just every time you read it, it's just kind of devastating to see her have the rug pulled out from under her. It's really good, very effective.
Yeah, so in an episode where Rogue gets a makeover, everyone makes hand claps together with people who are going to riot over Nightcrawler. I'm probably missing a few of the other little tidbits here and there. Storm kind of like make sure that Wolverine pulls his head in a little bit and isn't so erratic. We're maybe missing one or two of the other little things that we touched on there. Um, we are getting ready for the next thing in the X-Men, which is going to be the mutant massacre and all of um the snowball that starts rolling down the hill, all of the outcomes, all of the follow-ons that entail from this pretty major incident, Patrick. So are you ready for the rest of your mutant life? Because we're going to do issue 211 to wrap this thing up.
I know, yeah, it's gonna be crazy. Um, and stop. Okay, time out. We're never gonna get through this in 6 minutes.
Oh, okay. Well, you heard it here first. We can't do justice to this episode in 6 minutes. So we are going to hold off on the amazing X-Men 211 for the very next episode and then sort of recapitulate where this lies in the pantheon of excellence for Tarnished Bronze. So we're going to post this one shortly. You may need to wait a little for the next episode. I'd love to thank Patrick for going through these fantastic X-Men episodes with me. And we will see you shortly on another episode of